So, playing around with the Mother-32s again. Yeah, they're quite... I'm still kind of struggling a little bit, but the things I've found that have been really useful is sequencing on one and basically focusing on one Moog and just using the other one, hence it's kind of out of shot, and also the shot's a pain in the ass to set up, but the other one, the top one's just kind of creating a harmonic. So the top one's just basically being triggered by the bottom one through some, CV and gate, although they call it, what do they call it? Keyboard and gate. So this is kind of just tracking, so whatever pitches are being played on this top one does the same thing, and but the filters and everything on this one are fed into this one, so I can kind of get these interesting kind of resonances on the top one and in the bottom one, so it's kind of like a double filter essentially. And then it's on the mix, so on the, it's so big on the mix is basically the top one or the bottom one, and they're basically a fifth apart, so you can kind of do this pitching thing, which is quite nice. It seems to be really loud, like look at that, the volume's hardly turned on, it seems to be bumping out. Probably this crazy resonance. This sort of thing, it kind of gets, sometimes I kind of get a bit lost where I am, and I think that quickness of being able to find your way around is slowly coming, but it takes some time just to kind of get really smooth with it. Knowing kind of I know from experience switching between low pass and high pass is this switch should be red. This can get quite crazy. You've got a pumping bass and you flick the high pass and all of a sudden everything's like ridiculously loud. But yeah, also between like flipping between the polarities and stuff, knowing just to kind of move your attacks and stuff to kind of compensate. I'll kind of show you, you can have like, some kind of, especially when you've got the sustain on as well, just the volume, can be quite big. But on your polarity, when you switch that, just kind of creating, knowing where to put your filters, just so you've kind of got some movement, and it's still, which is, I love a negative polarity. It just has so much, you can kind of really move your rhythms, and you can kind of use the decays to create some interesting sort of drops and things that will kind of punctuations, but they're kind of off, which is quite nice. But yeah, been quite enjoying it. But at the same time, I've been really struggling trying to get a point where I can hit record. The amount of times I've hit record, only to stop it again and thinking, oh, there's a new direction. It can be both exciting and equally frustrating. I can see why, not being really a modular person myself. I mean, I have the normal modular, but that kind of constant sort of playing and looking at people's patches online is just hugely complex. I can kind of see why that kind of happens if you're really into just synthesis and just kind of exploring. Man, it's just like, the world's your limit really. But it's sort of I'm really focused on just getting kind of sketches and tracks and music kind of done, and this can kind of be a bit of a block. One thing I found quite cool, I forgot I had these. If you've ever used these little kind of, I think it's Befico. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Funny typeface. These are really cool, just to kind of like patch. I think I've got mine like the envelope gate kind of coming out, or the envelope curve, I think it is just being fired into the VCA in and the resonance as well, so you can kind of get this punctuation just really useful just to be able to kind of like route multiple things, because there's definitely with mults and mixes and things you can kind of run out pretty quickly. So I've got like a couple more of these, which are really useful. I kind of forgot I had them, but yeah, I mean, I find this really useful, having one sequencer triggering the other one, as opposed to having separate ones. And maybe this is just a case of me being kind of quite new to it still, but or at least new to these machines, and we've had them years. But just being able to kind of create some polyphony, I guess, and kind of create some complexity within that sound really helps. The other thing that I really didn't think this machine did, which is kind of bad, but it kind of has the 101 style sequencer, which is a huge thing for me. So basically you can put in a sequencer, just tap in some notes and set some parameters as you know, with ratchets or gates and stuff as you type. So you can just hammer in some notes, and then whatever the length of those notes are, or however many steps there are for those notes, if you've got 3 or you've got 5 or you've 6 steps or whatever, and in the case of this sequences I think it's 9, then you just hit start and it or hit run, and it just loops those around, as opposed to having to fill up like or reduce the end length, which is quite useful. So the set end position, when you're using the step mode, you kind of have to set it and then you kind of work towards it, which I find you're kind of deciding what parameters or what bucket you want to put contents that you don't know what the contents is yet. It's like buying some luggage and you've no idea, like buying some what are they called, some luggage, and then your luggage the stuff you put in the luggage is like you don't know what it is, so you're just like guessing how much space you need. So I find I always find that kind of a bit awkward, unless you've already got a sequence and you just want to knock it down to like a smaller one and just to kind of change it up a bit, then it kind of works. But putting those initial steps in I find really useful, because you're kind of working off the sound and you're working with the rhythm and pattern in mind, like all in one, as opposed to kind of like keying stuff in. So very much like the rhythm, you can just kind of, I think it's like record, stop off the top of my memory, and you can just fill them up, which is a really good addition they had to it. So lots of parallels there, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, there's nothing particularly fancy going on. I mean, the patching, this this isn't even plugged in. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, classic patching. I guess as patching goes, I've basically got looks more complicated than it is. It's just a case of wanting to do things with one trigger or one output. So in the case of this one, we've got like the keyboard tracking going into our input mult, and then output going to the top one, and also the cutoff on this one. And the top one, it goes into another mult, which goes into being able to pitch it, which is the VCO 1 volt octave thing, and also the filter cutoff. So I've got keyboard tracking on both, but that's like just like a shit ton of cables. It's just crazy when you think about it. So yeah, again, these things come really in handy, just to be able to kind of capitalize on one output and just send that to, like, I don't know what we got here, 5 outputs, which is really cool. So yeah, just checking my math there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, they're pretty big sounding still. I think I've got a little bit of reverb running on this one. I changed the setup, my sort of streaming setup completely today, so I've kind of dug out my Motu. So I might find that this whole video is just shit with audio. I don't know. Well, hopefully it comes out okay with the computer struggles a little bit, but which is great, because I can run some compressor and stuff on this microphone and not have to use a USB one. I'm not using the mixer anymore, so I've got a bit more space out of camera. Well, I can see a bit of the desk, let's put it that way. So that's quite useful. And the Motu, I've got the old Motu, Ultralite Mk3, and it has like built-in reverb, which is, it's okay. But it also have like EQ, compression, all that stuff in there, which is great, because I kind of forgot entirely that that's the case. That's been quite useful for this. So we've got a bit of compression on this, and also a bit of EQ, just to kind of deal with some frequencies, particularly around this patch. So sometimes feels a bit weird doing that, like you know, like you want to kind of give some authenticity sometimes. I feel like this is what the Moog is, but I don't know, I like making good music, and if it's compromising by having it pure, then that's kind of shit, isn't it? You just want to have it sound good. So I mention that because a lot of the time you'll see you know, hardware only, or you know, no DAW, or this kind of bollocks, and I don't know, just whatever rocks your boat really, but if it sounds good, that's all that matters. So hopefully this doesn't sound too bad. But yeah, there's sort of quite a few directions you could kind of take it. You can pick up the velocity amount and play around with the envelopes to kind of get that a bit more, you know, a bit more I find you get into that, like, oh yeah, there's some ratchets going on there, which immediately just reminds me of modular stuff, so I'm trying to be careful with them, but it adds a little bit of rhythm, which is quite nice. So you can kind of do that kind of stuff. Another cool thing is you could pitch the top one independently. So so we can kind of have, let's have it a bit clearer. So there we go. So you can pitch the top one independently, and also pick a different pitch, which I didn't realize when I was tuning it, but I could do a fifth quite easily that way. So you can get these kind of you know, interesting harmonic kind of qualities when you go to resonances. If I can work out what I'm doing, there you go. So this is something I mentioned in the last video. If you go up into the higher register, something that the rhythm really struggles with because of the pitch limitations, but you can really get some glassy kind of bell-like qualities. And it's super clean, but I don't know, for those of you who know hard techno music, this is screaming out to be distorted, I feel. So this is basically like the top one with none of the oscillators at the bottom one, but just using the second filter. Yeah, so some interesting stuff. You know, already it's kind of gone in a different space, and you know, this is the trouble. I mean, it's good, but like, you're like, oh, maybe it can be a texture, you know. So I think what I'm finding with this, oh, my back kills. I've been sat here for way too many hours. I think what I'm finding with this is like, it just what its utility is, and kind of where it sits with creativity. Like, is it kind of like a sketch pad, or is it like a sound that sits in a track, or you know, like what's the deal with it? Like, ultimately, what would you go to this piece of equipment for? I feel like for me that's quite a track kind of idea. Or at least a kind of you know, what I kind of associate equipment with when I'm trying to make a track is like, I'm going to go to a particular piece of equipment for a particular reason, and I think this is kind of part of like exploring you know, this machine, or any machine for that matter, and seeing like what is its, you know, kind of place, I guess. I think like when you're focusing on one box, then it can be whatever. But with this, it being on its own, it's still kind of limited to have a whole kind of track doing it this sort of way. I mean, I have done some weird experimental stuff with it that's really glitchy, and it can hold its own on that sort of area. But in this kind of like more sound designy space, it feels like it obviously needs other things. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's quite versatile again. You know, like with the rhythm, this reminds me, it kind of had, I found that really difficult to know where to sit that in the studio, aside from the fact that the lights are really bright on the rhythm, which I've kind of found a way around, i.e. don't use many tracks. That was also like, what role is this playing? It can do so much that it kind of feels like the rest of the studio is somewhat redundant, but it doesn't do it as well. So then you're kind of like, well, then the rhythm's redundant. So I always found like I was having more interesting times with it away from the studio, but then kind of wanted to integrate it back. And yeah, found that quite difficult sometimes, knowing how something fits in. But yeah, I don't know. Like an easy way around that though is like. You don't really investigate too much. You just find something that sounds good and you just capture it, and then you continue on your way with whatever you're doing. This sounds quite cool. Quite like this. It's very like the high fidelity. You see what I mean? I mentioned it before. Like it sounds just like really, I don't know, posh. It sounds a bit too posh for me sometimes, but I don't know. That does sound edgy. I mean, I've got the VCA being hammered again just to give it some crunch, just to kind of make it a bit more eclipse internally. I find that just takes the edge off a little bit. If you have any cats, cover their ears. Sometimes it just works. Be nice if it was like this all the time. Reminds me a bit of very different sound, but it reminds me of an old Christian Vogel album on Trezor. Forget what it was called. Had like a white, red, and black cover. Had lots of kind of like weird FME kind of stuff. I want to say he did that on a DX7 since I've owned one after that album, but the envelopes are very like Moogy, which makes sense because it's a Moog, but yeah, it's so fun. And I don't know. It's like it sort of states the obvious. If you're like, oh wow, it sounds like a Moog, but it really does. The cats can come back. When you can just pitch, so the bottom one obviously pitches both of them, which is cool. So that's separation, but ultimate control at the same time, which is quite cool. You see what I mean about like not being able to hit record? So I'm going to leave it there. It would be nice to say that it was this nice for the last handful of hours, but let's hope this video comes out, because that was the most together it sounded in the last 2 days. Yeah, so I guess I found a way in then. That's good. Sequencing one with another, but using a CVN gate, not syncing the sequences, or at least for now. The project won't be in the description because there is none. If you wanted to see the settings for the top one, I guess like ping me a message. I can post a photo to community again or something. But it's probably best just to play around, I guess. Yeah, nice one. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.